When it comes to performance sport compacts, few brands do it as well as Volkswagen. Remember, this is the company that gave us the original GTI hot hatch nearly 40 years ago. Now for 2022, VW is introducing an all-new GTI, and because this model has been on the market for so long, it's quickly become synonymous with enthusiasts as the perfect daily driver because it offers the ideal blend of comfort, technology, performance, but above all, livability. So as you can see, I'm standing by the redesigned GTI. They now call it the Mark 8 GTI. And because this car has been so successful, Volkswagen has offered it in a sedan flavor called the Jetta GLI, and they've been offering that for a few years now. So today I'm actually out in Asheville, North Carolina, with two of the newest members of the sport compact family, the redesigned GTI and of course the refreshed 2022 Jetta GLI. And the big question I want answered, if you guys are an enthusiast looking for the perfect daily driver, does Volkswagen still offer a vehicle designed for you? Stay tuned to find out. So I'm going to try my best to not do a comparison test between these two vehicles. However, I do believe at Volkswagen dealerships that a lot of consumers end up cross-shopping the two cars because essentially we have similar performance figures. However, the Volkswagen GTI, you should know, is considerably more expensive at the top end versus the Jetta. So let's start, of course, with the walk-around at the back of the GTI because this is known as the quintessential hot hatch. In fact, in this color, this bright yellow color, which is part of the launch edition vehicle, it certainly makes the GTI look a lot more distinctive. The previous generation was criticized heavily for being a little bit boring. It looked a little bit too much like a regular Golf. However, now for the Mark 8, we don't even get the standard Golf here in the US. It's now just GTI or Golf R. So if you guys want to watch my Golf R video, be sure to watch that video as well. I'll include a link in the description below. Now looking at the rear of this all new GTI, you can see it's got the new Volkswagen emblem. This is also the emblem that you push in that will open up the rear hatch, and it also reveals the backup camera. It has a GTI badge right there, of course in the signature red. And then the redesigned taillights you can see are an LED design. You have LED taillights, LED turn signals. This is nice because for the longest time, VW was robbing us of the full LED taillights in Europe and giving the US kind of a dumbed down version. So it's nice to see that. You can see also with the exhaust system, VW has the classic twin outlet exhaust system. It's not the kind of active exhaust that we might find in Europe, but VW has tweaked the sound. Let me go ahead and fire up the GTI so you guys can hear what it sounds like real quick. All right, that sounds pretty good, but because we have the GLI, let's fire this up so you guys can hear the difference. That's what the new sport exhaust they added this year. So now that you've heard the exhaust of both the GLI and the GTI, let me know in the comments below which one you actually think sounds better. They definitely sound a little bit meatier this year for the all-new generation. Now let's talk about the cargo capacity for the GTI because this is obviously a selling feature of this model, and VW has expanded the cargo this year from about 16 cubic feet in the previous gen to about 19.9. If you fold down the rear seats, VW says you get around 35 cubic feet of space. 35 cubic feet of space is small. That's about 15 less than what you had in the previous generation. So I'm not entirely sure if they're measuring it in a different way. Regardless, this is obviously the more practical choice here. The GTI's cargo space is really usable. It even includes a temporary spare tire with some underfloor storage over there, which is nice. You obviously have your jack and whatnot to be able to replace the tire. And if you guys are looking for a hatchback or power hatch, VW has never offered that on the GTI, and that kind of continues with this all-new version. Now, in terms of the dimensions, they didn't change the overall size too much. In fact, at 168.7 inches long, it's only about a half an inch longer than the previous generation. The wheelbase stays the same at around 103.8 inches long. This is still built off of the MQB architecture. It has just been kind of heavily updated. You still have an upgraded suspension. And the cool thing about the GTI is now you can get it with 19-inch wheels. You can see my tester has the optional 19s because this is the fully loaded Autobahn package, and they're also wrapped in summer performance tires, Bridgestones on this one, which are 235 wide tires. These wheels, I'm not sure how I feel about them, but VW also offers a different choice of wheels depending on the trim level. You can see you have the prerequisite GTI badge right here, these turn signal indicators in the mirrors, and then above you, you can see it's almost got like a half-size panoramic sunroof, although obviously it doesn't go to the back seats, but I do like how there's kind of like a black portion here that gives it the effect of a pano roof. Now that we're coming to the front end of the new GTI, this is where you're going to notice the most changes, because VW tends to be really conservative with the exterior styling changes, and I actually think that the new GTI looks really interesting. It's very techy. It's very modern. It's also a little bit more interesting versus the previous generation. You can see all of them now come standard with the company's full LED headlights. You also have LED daytime running lights and turn signals. And the most controversial element is the fog lights. You now have these 5 individual diodes for the LED fog lights that kind of are integrated into the actual hexagonal shape of the grille pattern. You also have this signature red line here with an LED illumination light right there in the actual grille. I almost wish VW made the emblem light up like they do in the new Volkswagen ID4. It would have really completed the look of the front end and given this a really distinctive design. But overall, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the styling of the redesigned Mark 8. It definitely looks better in person versus when I first saw this vehicle in photographs. Now let's talk about the GLI, because this car also deserves some attention. This is one of the Volkswagen's best-selling models still. And if you guys prefer a more traditional sedan flavor, you're gonna like what they offer on the GLI. Now keep in mind, this generation was introduced in 2019. This is the Mark 7 Jetta platform, and it has a much larger grille versus what's on the GTI. You can see the grille is larger. You have the signature red line that kind of goes across the middle of the grille. There's no LED light bar, however, like what you get in the GTI, but all Jettas now come standard with full LED headlights. The turn signal, as you can see, is not LED. It's just an incandescent, but you have an LED daytime running light, low and high beams. No fog lights on the Jetta, but you can see there is this new area right here with the red outline that tries to make it look like there's a fog light in there. I kind of wish the VW had just done that. On lower levels of the Jetta, there actually will be a new LED accent light if you guys go for a non-GLI version. Now, because this is a sedan, you would assume that the cars are roughly the same size, but they're not. This car at 185 inches long is about 17 inches longer than the GTI. That is a significant difference, and it's one of the reasons why this car gives you a bigger back seat, and again, you get that traditional trunk. Now the wheels, VW only offers an 18-inch wheel, up to an 18-inch wheel on the GLI. You can see the design is a little bit, I guess, less aggressive versus the GTI. VW actually says the front brakes on this car, they come from the Mark 7 Golf R. The new Golf R has different brakes, but these brakes are the upgraded ones from the old Golf R. And then this car also remains front-wheel drive. Both cars have that limited slip differential. You can also get a kind of larger standard sunroof here, but it's not quite a full pano roof. This is going to be standard because GTI or GLIs only come in the Autobahn trim for 2022. And at the back, you can see very Audi-like proportions. It's one of the reasons why some of you may prefer the look of the GLI. Personally, for me, I like the GTI's design for its hot hatch looks. But you can see the taillights are actually a full LED. The front has an incandescent turn signal, but it's a full LED back here. And then down here on the rear bumper diffuser, it's a little bit more aggressive this year, and VW also kind of redesigned the exhaust system on this car so it looks a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more premium. Now obviously, because it's a sedan, the trunk space isn't quite as big as the GTI's, but you still get just over 14 cubic feet of space. The seats fold down in a 60/40 manner. You have these hinges that do crush your cargo, and then looking underneath here, just like the GTI, you also get a temporary spare tire, which is nice. So I've already showed you guys a pretty comprehensive overview of the interior of both of these vehicles, so I'm going to try to keep this brief. This one here is now the Autobahn only trim. It comes standard with Volkswagen's smart key access system. This is the company's older fob, as you can see. It also includes remote start on the fob. The one in the GTI has a slightly different look to the key fob. But opening the door, you can see the seats. This is the seats that come standard on the Autobahn package. They're black leather with the red stitching and the red insert, which definitely makes the seats look nice. They're a 10-way power adjustment, and you have a 3-person memory, which is kind of rare to find in this segment. But when you get inside the vehicle, you can see the seats definitely feel a little bit more comfort oriented. I mean, I like how VW gives you the standard power seats. The steering wheel also has been redesigned this year to include the new Volkswagen emblem. It has the new touch sensitive buttons. When you start the vehicle up, the start stop button here is by the shifter, and you can see Every VW comes standard with the digital cockpit display. So it's a 10-inch display here, and you have an 8-inch display over here. This is the older infotainment system. You have traditional knobs, you have traditional buttons, of course, you have heated and cooled seats, which is nice. You have a Beats stereo system, and then you have this sunroof here, which lets in some light. No LED lighting in the cabin, as you can see. This is just a standard incandescent bulb. At least you do get features like wireless Apple CarPlay, which is nice. I wasn't expecting to find that, especially in this price point. And then the interior, you can see soft touch injection molded plastic, but it also just feels a little bit more dated in here. It feels a little bit more old school, but it also has a nice roomy feel. I also like the material that VW uses here. It almost tries to look like a mixture of like this aluminum with this red accent. It really matches well with the red seats and the red accents that you find all over the interior. The door panel is also soft touch material here, traditional window switches and whatnot. The window switches themselves, they feel pretty high quality, and you have soft touch materials here where your elbows would rest. Now the back seat of the GLI is really a selling feature because of the vehicle's longer overall length. You get around 37.5 inches of legroom back here, which 37.5 makes it one of the most spacious in the segment, which is nice. However, you should keep note here, because of the Jetta's price point, you have hard touch plastic materials back here with a lot of sea of black plastic. There's actually a lot less. There's no red stitching back here. It is slightly padded over here. You only have one rear seat back mat pocket. And then you can see here, even though this is a fully loaded Autobahn, no rear seat air vents, no USB ports, no heated rear seats. But at least you do have an armrest that folds down here with 2 cup holders, and it offers a pretty decent amount of space. So the bigger back seat is obviously going to be in the Jetta GLI. Now in contrast, let's take a look at the interior of the GTI, because this model here is also a fully loaded Autobahn edition, and the key fob for the vehicle, you can see, is the newer Volkswagen key. This is the same key that I showed you guys that the ID4 has. It's a nice key, but you lose the remote start on the actual fob, so that's something to keep in mind. And here's the interior of the Autobahn model. It includes real leather, and I love how VW is using a more aggressively bolstered sports seat. You still have 3-person memory. These are heated and cooled, 10-way power adjustment, and I love how it's like a 2-tone color, so it's not just a boring black interior. Now, getting inside, you can see the interior of the GTI definitely looks a lot more modern. You can see the digital cockpit display is also standard on every version. It has a slightly different chime, which is their a little bit more updated version. And then you can see here, you have a 10-inch display here and another 10-inch display here. It also includes wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But unlike the Jetta, which had traditional knobs and buttons, this has a lot of touch-sensitive buttons, which are finicky to use. They're really slow at times. You can see there are so many times where I start this vehicle up and it just constantly says, please wait, like right there. It's not available yet. Now, of course, this is their newest infotainment system. It does include features like wireless over-the-air updates, but I really want VW to kind of beef up the processing speed because the software in this car really is not that good. Now, in terms of the materials, let's talk about the steering wheel. It's pretty similar to the one that's in the GLI, but you can see the Volkswagen emblem is slightly different. Still has a flat bottom design. It still has a lot of touch-sensitive buttons here, and the heated wheel button, as you can see right here, you constantly hit that while you're driving. I noticed that several times when I was behind the wheel of this vehicle. But at least it has pretty solid materials. Not class leading like Volkswagen used to be, but you can see here soft touch injection molded plastic, Harman Kardon stereo. You have a full heads-up display over there, which is nice. It goes well with the rest of the digital displays in the interior. You have wireless phone charging, which you also had in that vehicle. And then the materials, you can see, instead of that interesting black and red textured plastic, VW kind of puts like a carbon fiber look aluminum trim, which I think looks nice, but I think I might prefer what you find in the GLI. And then over here you can see there's a sunroof. There is full LED lighting in here, which you get incandescent in the GLI, so that's another reason why you'd want to get the new version. And then overall, it feels roomy in this vehicle. It feels spacious. The door panel materials, you can see, are still soft touch injection molded plastic. The same window switches over here, although I'm surprised VW didn't put any red stitching on the door panels like you get on the GLI. Now, the downside, of course, this being a smaller car, it has a little bit less space in the back seat, so we get around 35.6 inches of legroom back here, which is still decent. You can see here with these redesigned seats, VW gives you far more in terms of usability storage. You have 2 map pockets here, which are perfect for your phone. You actually find the same thing on the other side. You have another storage pocket over here. And unlike the Jetta, you have heated back seats back here, your own set of rear seat climate control, rear seat air vents. So even though this has a little bit less legroom, this is the more luxurious option. Unfortunately, material quality back here is still hard touch plastic, so I was surprised that VW is cutting corners here, but you can see there's actually adjustable ambient lighting in both of these cars. You have 30 different color choices, and then you have soft touch materials right here where your elbows would rest. So overall, if you want the bigger back seat, you're gonna want the Jetta, but if you want more tech and luxury, you're gonna want this model. So mechanically underneath the hood, these two vehicles are pretty similar because they both use a version of VW's corporate EA888 2-liter turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder. The engine is actually now in its 4th generation, and obviously the motor that we find in the GTI is going to be the most current model, and it's also the most powerful model, making 241 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque. Compare that to the engine in the GLI, which makes 228 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. That is the output figures of the old Mark 7 GTI. So I was surprised that VW didn't stuff this powertrain under the hood of the refreshed Jetta GLI. Now, of course, both of these vehicles offer a choice between either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. They also are both front-wheel drive only with an electronic VAQ limited slip differential. So it's not a mechanical one, it's an electronic one. Now, fuel economy is actually better in the Jetta. This model gets 26 city, 36 highway. This model here gets 24, 34. A 2 mpg difference isn't really that big of a deal to most people. However, if you guys are looking at the weight, the GTI is the lighter option. This weighs in at around 3,100 pounds. The larger GLI is heavier by about 200 pounds, so it's around 3,300 pounds. 0 to 60 performance, VW says 6.3 seconds for this model, around 6.5 for that model. Obviously, the heavier one's gonna be the slower option, but we're gonna get both out on the road. We're gonna find out which one is actually the quicker 0 to 60 performance after driving the two back to back. I would love to try the launch control here, but I did turn off the traction control.
Pull over into this little ditch. Right here.
Oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh.
Get all the way. Don't pull forward, we will be stuck.
Brakes, sport, okay, there we go.
All right, your last launch of a manual was not successful, so
I know, it wasn't.
Let's see if you can reclaim yourself.
All right, launching the manual GTI.
Mother of God.
Oh God. Probably a little too much revs there. 6.46 seconds. Yes, the GTI has a little bit of wheel hop.
That's a hell of a lot of wheel hop.
But that was almost like 3,000. That was like 3,000 clutch dumps. So that was a little more aggressive than I would have liked
it. Was your first one too. You
yeah.
don't modulate that shit yet.
But 6.46 seconds 0 to 60 just on my first try is really not bad. VW says, I believe, 6.3 seconds for this car with the stick. The dual clutch is obviously going to be faster. I imagine the dual clutch will probably be able to crack the 6-second barrier. But regardless, we are driving the new GTI. This is now with 241 horsepower. It's got a 11 horsepower bump versus the old one. So it's a pretty decent number. There is not really launch control on the manual model, but we'll go ahead. My left foot is the launch control, right?
Was it cutting power?
It felt like it was a little bit. We'll try a little bit softer launch. Okay, that was a little better. It still wheel hops into second. That's impressive. All right, 6.34 seconds there. So that was better. And this is about what I expected the manual to do. Obviously, if you want the quicker 0 to 60 performance, you need to go for the dual clutch. I imagine that will easily be able to crack the 6-second mark. But we actually just got out of the Golf R into the GTI. So we drove the Pinnacle first, now we're in the GTI. This car does come with front-wheel drive only. It comes with Volkswagen's VAQ electronic limited slip differential. It's not a mechanical limited slip diff that you might find in something like the Civic Si or the Hyundai Veloster N or the upcoming Elantra N. I'm actually surprised VW doesn't want to go to a mechanical limited slip diff, but this is supposed to help mitigate the torque steer, the wheel hop. As you guys saw, there was a good amount of wheel hop, but not as much torque steer as I thought it would have. This car does feel slightly lighter than the Golf R. It's about 200 pounds lighter. And there's always been a time, or there's always been the case of the GTI is good enough. You don't necessarily need to go for the Golf R. And really, I don't think that's the case anymore for the new versions because of the all-wheel drive, the drift capabilities, how ridiculously quick the Golf R is. But this is still a phenomenal driving hot hatch. This has always been the quintessential hot hatch, the benchmark. And this one that we're driving here in Pomelo Yellow, it's the Autobahn Launch Edition car. This yellow color is much nicer looking in person than it is in pictures, I think. And you can hear Volkswagen has made this car a little more visceral this year. I can hear the exhaust. I don't believe, so VW actually didn't put active rev matching in this car, which I kind of wish they did, but you can hear there's a little bit of a pop there. Yeah, there's a little bit of a pop from the exhaust. You also can sense that they are augmenting the sound a little bit. And the shifter, it feels like the last GTI I drove. The throws are a little bit longer than I would like. The clutch takes a little bit of time to get used to where it engages and such, but it's a very strong engine. It likes to keep pulling hard well into the red line. And this is essentially Gen 4 of Volkswagen's E888 4-cylinder. But let's go ahead and try one more launch, just because we can. I'll try to modulate it a little better this time. God, that was horrible. Yeah, that was bad. And this is the problem with a manual, is like, you have to be on your A game for shifting, for the launch, for the traction, like, and that's kind of why manuals are dying, because manuals aren't the quicker option anymore. There used to be a time where you'd get the manual to have the quicker accelerating car because automatics were just terrible, but that's not the case anymore. The 7-speed dual clutch in this car is just a superior transmission for performance, and that's kind of the world that we live in now. But other than that, if you guys are a pure enthusiast, which I think people who buy GTIs tend to choose the manual anyways because of the fact that it's a decent manual, not quite as good as the Mazda or the Honda transmission for manuals, but the throws are nice, it's smooth, the ride quality is also good. I have the suspension right now in its stiffest setting in sport mode, and I'm actually surprised the ride quality is still equally good. So VW still knows obviously how to make this car handle well, but it also is a relatively easy daily driver. I mean, this is the perfect daily driver. It's always been that way. If you're looking for a practical car that gets decent gas mods, that's comfortable, quiet, has a lot of tech features and luxury, but also still relatively fun to drive, you get a GTI. That's always been the case, and it hasn't changed with this Mark 8. What VW has added here is more power, a nicer interior, although I'm not entirely sure that the tech is better. This has the same frustrating infotainment system in the Golf R and the new Volkswagen ID4. But I like the seats. They're pretty comfortable and supportive. They hold you in place, not quite as aggressively bolstered as the Golf R seats, but that's expected. The steering wheel also feels nice in your hands. It's a heated wheel. This model here also has heated and ventilated seats, which you couldn't even get in a GTI before. So it's nice. Their IQ Drive full suite of driver assistance is standard on every model. The Autobahn trim gives you things like a heads-up display, which you couldn't get before, and then you have the standard adaptive chassis control, so you have the adaptive dampers, which give you the ability to really adjust the ride quality and custom tailor it to exactly the setting that you want. So overall, I'm impressed with the new GTI. It drives nice. The fact that it has trouble putting the power down when you're really driving aggressively makes me want to go to the Golf R, but remember, it is more expensive to go for the all-wheel drive version of the Golf. But this one here, as tested, is just under 40 grand. It does make it one of the more expensive offerings in the segment. So really, if you guys are looking for value, I might suggest just sticking with an S or an SE model, which is around $30,000 to $35,000. I think that makes more sense. You really have to want all the additional features that the Autobahn gives you to justify paying almost 40 grand for this car. Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you all for watching this video and talk about a bunch of new merch that we just added. It's all about the thunk. If you're interested in showing your support by purchasing this shirt, as well as a few others, be sure to visit the merch shelf located just below this video. Now, speaking of support, be sure to like, subscribe, and be sure to turn on all those notification bells so you're always alerted every time we make a new upload. All right, so after just getting out of the manual transmission Golf GTI and into the Jetta GLI, you instantly get a sense that you're driving a vehicle that is obviously older. Not that much older, but VW obviously gave this car a refresh, but it's not a full redesign like the way that the Golf R was. But first thing I do want to try out is the 0 to 60 performance. And the cool thing about this one is it has an actual physical button for the traction control. Six 6.84 seconds and plenty of wheel spin. Oh. So much drama. That was funny. Now, this car does have 11 less horsepower than the GTI, but I wasn't expecting it to be slower. But clearly, this car, even with the launch control, it had a little problem putting the power down. So if we get another opportunity, we're going to try doing another 0 to 60, because I was expecting this car to be slightly quicker.
What let you do one with traction control on?
Well, right now the traction control is in its sport setting, so it has to be in this sport setting for it to engage the launch control. I just love how this car has a physical button, so I can turn off the start-stop, I can turn off the traction control from a physical button instead of going through this screen and going through these different menus. It's just a pain in the ass in the GTI to do it, and I really think that they kind of went backwards by not just giving us a physical button to do it in. But I guess we can try again right here. Let's see what we can get. Plenty of more wheel spin probably is what we get. All right, it's in sport mode. It's interesting how it keeps the revs there too. 6.78 seconds there, so a little quicker, slightly uphill gradient. We're going 2.1%, but yeah, I mean, this car definitely doesn't feel quite as powerful. It also doesn't feel quite as sporty. I mean, this car definitely feels sportier than the regular Jetta, but you get a sense that this car is tuned a little bit more for comfort, which it's a much bigger car. You feel that this vehicle is longer. I mean, 17 inches longer is pretty significant, and the weight of this car is also a little bit more. Put my foot down there. Definitely doesn't feel as fast as the GTI with the manual, so I'm a little sad that Volkswagen didn't stuff the upgraded engine from the GTI into this vehicle, but I guess they're trying to build it to a price point, although this car is about the same price as a base GTI. But remember, the Autobahn package gives you all of this stuff, versus the GTI that we were driving earlier was about 39 grand, so it's about 10,000 more than this car. So I guess you have to give up a little bit of speed, but you get all of the luxury features as well from the Autobahn package. So we have the heated and cooled seats, we have the upgraded stereo system, which they use a Beats audio system in this car. You have the two displays, although this display here is smaller. It's only 8 inches versus 10 in the GTI, but everything else is a little bit easier to use because this is the older system. But if you're looking for some of the newest tech, obviously you're going to want the GTI. But going through some curves here, you can feel, yeah, this car's suspension is a little bit softer. It, at least, yeah, it just feels a little bit more disconnected. Feels bigger. Feels like it's saying like, it's still quick. It's still quick, and the dual clutch is still great. I think personally, I much prefer driving the GTI, and I expected that, but I can't deny the level of value that they offer here with the GLI. I mean, you get a bigger back seat, you get a traditional sedan, which some of you actually prefer that. The look of this car, the refresh, the styling updates they made for 2022, I think definitely improved the look of it. I just think that VW should have included the upgraded engine with this refresh. I wish that they did, but this is certainly no slouch, and this has roughly 28 more horsepower than the upcoming 2022 Civic Si, which is the main rival to this vehicle. But then we also have to think about the Elantra N, which has 275 horsepower, and you kind of wonder if VW could have pushed this car a little bit more. But it's certainly still a fun car. The seats don't hold you in place as good, however, as I think as the GTI. They feel like a little bit more comfort-oriented. Yeah, I'm kind of sliding all over the place. So that there's another area that reminds you this is not as focused as a performance vehicle as the GTI, but that's okay. That's never, the GLI has kind of been a GTI with a sedan, or with a trunk lid, a sedan GTI, but VW clearly went a more softer GT route with this model, but they also give it to you at a significant discount, so there's a reason why you'd want to choose this. So getting an opportunity to drive the redesigned GTI and GLI back-to-back is a pretty rare treat, and after spending some time driving both, it's pretty obvious to me as an enthusiast that I much prefer the sharper and quicker reflexes of the GTI. You can really feel that it has additional power. It's got better sports seats that hold you in place better. And while the interior feels a little bit more modern with the updated tech, I also find it to be extremely frustrating to use at times because it doesn't have any physical hard buttons or knobs. So I'm really sad that VW kind of went backwards on the interior for the all-new GTI. That brings me, of course, to the refreshed GLI, because don't discount this car. It's still a really good option for those of you who want the more traditional feel. The interior definitely feels a little bit more dated. It has a slightly smaller screen. However, it's a lot easier to use versus the GTI. And even though it has less power, it still offers plenty of acceleration. It's got decent handling and a quieter, smoother ride quality. Really, The seats don't hold you in place as much, and I also much prefer the looks of the GTI, but that's going to come down to a personal preference. On paper, this car should theoretically be more comfortable to daily drive and also get slightly better gas mileage, at least according to the EPA. But of course, the final decision is going to come down to how much are you willing to spend, because the GLI got refreshed this year and it got significantly more expensive versus the 2021 model. This car now starts at just over 30 grand for the Autobahn model. However, you should notate that VW got rid of the base GLI for 2022. So really, in all actuality, the price difference is only about $100. This one here with Destination is about $32,000 because it also has the dual clutch transmission, which raises the price by about $800. The GTI starts at around $29,900, which is actually a little bit less expensive than the GLI, but that's for the base S model here. This fully loaded Autobahn version stickers for around $39,000, just over 40 grand if you guys get the DSG, which this one has, including the destination charge. So you've got roughly a $10,000 difference in price between the two vehicles. I'm not entirely sure the GTI is worth an extra 10 grand. If it were my money, I'd probably look at the mid-level SE version and forgo some of the additional tech features that this car has on the Autobahn package, because for 35 grand, I think it's worth the additional charge. For 40 grand, I think it's too expensive and it's getting a little bit too close to the price tag of a fully loaded and much more powerful Volkswagen Golf R. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2022 GTI and of course the GLI. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.